Okay, hello and good day to everyone. Welcome to this edition of our Friday Fundamentals. My name is Steve. Thank you for joining me. Today I'm going to be covering off some of the basic principles and methods of drawing a simple site plan within SoftPlan for viewing in your 3D model. To do so, we do need to create property lines of the site, and I'm going to be going over two methods of doing so. One will be a simple trace over top of an imported image of the site, and the other will be using a more precise method of inputting actual surveyor's coordinates. At that point, then I'll go over and show you how we can easily add some terrain to slope the site for a walkout basement and finish it off with some details such as a patio, sidewalk, and some landscaping. As always, this session is going to be recorded and will be posted to our social media pages so you can review today's content at a later time. I've got a project opened up here. You'll notice that there's some blue walls there. What we've done here, this is an actual addition to an existing structure. The addition part has been added to a building option, and anything assigned to that building option has been given that blue color. This allows us to quickly turn on and off the building option to show us what the original structure looks like. So here's the original building. From a 3D point of view, it's a fairly simple and plain rear view. So this is actually towards the back where the addition has been designed for. And I can, again, reverse that building option changes, put the addition back on. And so this was the requirement and design for the addition of the structure. The grade that you see here is the auto horizon. And the auto horizon is a flat, infinite plane that kind of cuts through the building. We could change the location of where that auto horizon is. I can come up here from the options menu, go to setup options. I can turn it on and off. And if I do turn it off, you'll see that there is a walkout basement designed to the back of the structure. If I turn the horizon back on, I can dictate where that's going to be. If I set up to be 2 feet up, and that would be up from the lowest point or the bottom of the foundation walls, that's about where the back of the grade needs to be. However, towards the front, we do need to show a slope to come up to the front of the building. So in order to do that, we do need to create a separate site plan so we can control that terrain. And again, I'm going to be showing you two methods of doing so. One's a simple method of importing an image from Google Maps. And the second method is a little bit more involved, but it does create a more accurate site plan. The first method, again, creating the site plan from an imported image. To start off with, we switch ideally your main floor plan, and we'll switch that to site mode. From site mode, from the draw menu, we'll go to building outline and then generate building outline. What this command does, it takes the perimeter of the building that's created and creates a simple line representation of that building's perimeter. It's prompting me for a name here, so I'm going to quickly give it a name. And because this will be the one imported from an image, I'll name it as such, and I'll hit save. So there's the start of my site plan. The building outline that we see here is just a representation of the building's perimeter. There's actually two here because the original design has a deck. That's the little square at the top. The deck itself also creates a building outline separate from the house building outline. The next thing we need to do is grab information from Google Maps. So if we don't have the actual site plan, if I bring up Google Maps here, the property that we're going to concentrate on is this little house here, and I can zoom into it. So that's where the addition is going to go. The front of the building obviously is facing the road, so the addition comes out the back and about this area here. In soft plan, the front of the building is down towards the bottom of the screen. So what I want to do is when I import this image, I want to have the front of the building from the image face the same direction as it's been designed in soft plan. To do that, within Google Maps, there's a compass point here. And you can hit the arrows, although it only turns in 90-degree increments. However, a little tip here, if you hold down the control key and then slide your mouse, you can rotate at any angle you want. So I'm holding down the control key, moving my mouse in this case towards the left. I'll let go of the control key and I'm just going to drag the image down, because what I want to do is I'm going to get the image to be as square as I possibly can to that road that's at the bottom. So again, holding down the control key, and I'll just eyeball it here until it looks relatively straight to the screen. I'm then going to drag it over to the right side. Again, the property I'm looking at is right here. So I'm going to capture that image. And there's a number of screen capture utilities. I'm going to use the one that's stock with Windows. It's called the snipping tool. You'll find it in your Windows utilities. It's fairly straightforward to use. I'll click on New, and I'm going to drag an expanding box to grab what I want to grab. Notice I'm also grabbing the compass point. That's why I kind of moved it down to that lower corner. I'll then save that image. It'll ask me where I want to save it. We'll call it Google Maps Capture, and save that. Back in soft plan, we can now import that saved image. To do so, File, Import, and Image. I'll grab the image I captured, open it, and to import an image, we just sketch an expanding box to indicate where we want to import that. So there's the image. The next thing we need to do, as you can see from the scale of the building in the actual image to the scale of my building outline, they're not quite the same. I'm going to add a quick dimension left to right through the building outline. It's 90 feet, and sure enough, that's the actual dimension of the building. If I switch my main floor back to drawing mode, it's a 90-foot wide original structure. So I'm going to use that 90-foot dimension to scale up my image. To do so, I'm first going to right-click on the image. And when you right-click it, you'll have an option there, Add Selection. This adds the image to what we call a selection set. So any command I now do will be applied to whatever is currently in the selection set, which is my image. Next, I'm going to come up to Edit, and then use our Adjust Size feature. Because it already knows what is in the selection set, it's not going to ask me to draw an expanding box. It prompts me right away for either a scale or a distance. In this case, I'm going to choose the distance field and punch in my known value, the 90 feet, and hit OK. I'll then zoom up to the image, and I'm going to click where the 90 feet starts and click where the 90 feet ends. I'll account for a slight bit of an overhang for the roof. So it's about here, click, come to the opposite end, again, account for a slight overhang, and click again. The program will then scale the drawing up, or in this case, the image up, to be 90 feet between my clicks. Now the image is much bigger than my current workspace. The workspace is designated by the gray lines, or gray box. So I'm going to increase my workspace so I have more room to work in. To do so, File, Drawing Options, Workspace Limits. The default workspace is, when you start any drawing in soft plan, it's 210 by 140. And when we create a site plan, as we did, that is generating a building outline, the program automatically doubles that workspace. And that's sufficient for most sites. Although on what we're doing here, we need it a little bit bigger. So I'm going to be quite generous here. I'm going to make it 1,500 wide by 1,000 in height. So now my workspace, again designated by the gray box that's around the perimeter, I have plenty of room to work in. I'm then going to use my move command and move my image. That's where the building outline is. So what I want to do is position the actual building in the image over top of where the building outline is. I'll hit F12 so I can go up and down, left to right at the same time. But the difficulty here is that as soon as I am over top of the building outline, I don't see it. That's because it's still part of a selection set. So anything underneath the image becomes hidden because the image itself is in a selection set. So we'll have a different method of positioning that building. First, I'll right-click and clear the selection. Once the selection set is clear, we now see the building outline, and I actually got quite close there. But if we need to move it a little bit more refined, I'm going to use a block move, but not move the image. Instead, I'm going to move the building outlines. I'm using block move because there are actually 3 items here that I'm moving. There's 2 building outlines and a reference point. That reference point is important. Now that I'm moving them, again, F12, I can be a little bit more precise as to where that building outline is relative to the rest of the image. Next, the direction of north, that's why I kept the compass. The direction of north, indicated by the red arrow, is pointing down towards the right side of the screen. So I want my north and soft plan to follow that same direction. Direction of north is controlled here, so when you're in site mode, there is a north arrow in your status bar. If you select it, it will ask you to indicate what that direction of north is. Straight up the screen is 90. Straight towards the left is 180. Straight down is 270. And straight towards the right is 360 or 0. Since we want ours to go down and towards the right, that's going to be about 315 degrees. So I'll set it to 315, hit OK. It will ask me if I want to rotate the items on the drawing. In this case, no, I do not want to do that. This just sets the north arrow equal to the north arrow from my image. The actual property lines are what we're going to sketch in next. To do so, draw, sight line, property, and sketch. I'll use the line method. These are all straight lines. We'll get a little bit closer. And these property lines in this case follow along the right side, just next to the driveway. They go just beyond the tree line, top and left, and follow the road, obviously, at the front. So that's the area I'm going to sketch. Just beyond the tree line. And about here now, I do know that the left side of the property is not quite parallel to the right side. So I'm going to hit F12 twice. I can go on a slight angle, click, and end where I started. And that's basically it. We've now created the site plan. I can, if I needed to, come up to options and visible items. From the drawing items category, I'll turn off images. And this leaves me with my site plan. So that's the first method. It's fairly straightforward and easy. Gets a fairly accurate representation of your site. You can go ahead and finish the site plan. But before we do those, we're going to go and do a second method. That is a more precise method by entering Surveyor's coordinates. I'm going to come back to my main floor plan, switch again to site mode, and generate another building outline. I'll call this one simply site plan. I'll zoom out to the full workspace. Again, that workspace has been doubled from the original drawing. So we got 420 left to right, 280 up and down. From the draw, sightline property, I'm going to select enter surveyor's coordinates. Now at this point, I do have the actual surveyor's coordinates. And what I can do here is start inputting those. We do, though, need to pick a logical start point. The first sight line, I'm going to draw the back property line. It's a northwest direction, and it's at a 45 degree, or approximate 45. According to my direction, north arrow, north obviously is straight down. West is going to be towards the right. So it's going to be on a 45 degree towards the west. So basically it's going to come straight to my screen over towards the right. So my first click is going to be the top left corner. Once you establish a start point, you get this add sightline dialog, and we can start entering that known information. So according to the surveyor's coordinates, the first bearing at the back is north 46. And what I'm doing here is I have my hands on the keyboard and I'm hitting the tab to cycle through the various fields. So 46 tab brings me up to the minutes dialog. That's 34. Tab 58. West, it's already specified there, so I'll hit tab again. And it'll ask me for the length of the sightline. It's 107.726 feet. It is important to indicate the unit of measurement, so it's feet here. Next thing is I'll hit enter on the keyboard. When I hit enter, I get a preview of what that sight line will look like before it's actually drawn. And as I predicted, it's coming out towards the right side of my screen. If that prediction is correct and accurate, you can hit the next button. The sight line that you just entered is actually now drawn, and the fields are cleared, allowing you to fill in the next sight line. The next sight line is also a north bearing, but goes east at about a 45 degree. So that means it's going to come straight down. So north, it's actually 44, 29, 10. In this case, it's east, so I will change it to direction 2 of east. And enter the length. I'll hit enter again. The preview of that sight line I just entered is shown. That looks accurate. Now the location of the house within is not important. We get to that next. We're just drawing the perimeter of the actual site. So that sight line relative to the first one I entered looks correct. I'll hit next. The next bearing is also a northwest, like the first one. The start point of the next sight line is at the end of the previous. So predicting it, it's going to come from this point and come again towards the right. I could enter a southeast direction, but the surveyor's coordinates I've given to me are all in the north bearing, which is typical. So I'm going to maintain that. I'll keep the north bearing. It's 45, then 30, 50. West is correct, and I'll enter the length. Feet, enter, and as predicted, it's going out towards the right. It's not the direction it needs to go. It needs to come in the opposite direction, or more specifically, the reverse direction. And that's what the reverse button does. So if you get if you are entering surveyor's coordinates, you'll likely discover that in most cases, they're all in a north bearing. And you can do so and enter them as they are given to you. But as necessary, we can reverse that direction, which is what I've done here. I'll hit next. Again, it's a north bearing, this time northeast, so it should go straight down. I'll just reverse it once I have it entered. That's 47, 35, 50. That's going to be east. I'll enter the length. Hit enter. As I predicted it goes down, I'll just reverse that direction and it ends where it needs to end. Now that I have the four drawn, the four sight lines, I'll hit OK. And if the sight line has actually been done accurately, each property line will be precisely touching the endpoint of its neighbor. And if the last two touch, we get a polygon. And we know we have a polygon because we see the shading through it. If there is no shading, and that can happen as well, depending on the accuracy of the site information you have, you may need to do a little bit of work to clean that up. Namely, let me demonstrate. I'm going to, excuse me, explode this and just kind of adjust it slightly out of the way. So if your condition came up to be as such, you'd have a little bit of extra work to clean that up. Again, that's depending on the accuracy of the information you have, but we can quickly clean that up by going to Tools and Fillet and click on those two sight lines. Finally, there's no shading there, so we don't have a true polygon of this site. So we come to Edit and Form Polygon. I can click on each property line, and then a final right click will then form a polygon out of those selected sight lines. To recap, that's a left, 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 and then a final right click to form the polygon. So now that I got the site drawn, the next task is to position the building accurately within the site. There's two things we need to first accomplish. Number one is to get the building to be parallel to the front of the property. The front property line is not quite even 45, it's 45, 30, 50. So I'm going to edit the front edge of my building or my building outline and match its bearing. So now my building outline is parallel to the front of the lot. There's two building outlines here as well. Again, one's from the deck. So I'm going to have to do the same to it. Give it the same bearing. And then I'm just going to move with cursor snap enabled, move that secondary building outline back to where it needs to go. So now I got my building outline facing the right direction. What I now want to do is indicate where this bottom left corner of the house needs to be situated. Before I do that, I want to rotate the entire drawing in this point such that the bottom of the site and obviously the bottom of the house are squared to the drawing screen. That's the direction of the actual floor plans, and I want the house to be in that same orthographic. To do so, I'm going to come back to my north options, and I'm going to need to change the direction of north such that the angle of the building outline and the front of the lot are in the same direction, or 90 degrees to the screen. The current bearing of the front is 45, 30, 50. And I have a website here because we need to do a little bit of math with angles, or degrees, minutes, and seconds. This is a math open reference website. There's a number of mathematical calculators here. There's an angle calculator here that works perfectly for what we want to do. And what we want to do is take 360 degrees minus the 45, 45, 10, 50. Sorry, 45, 30, 50. To recap that, again, a line going straight towards the right side of the screen is a 0 or 360 degree. And if I rotate that down the 45, 30, 50, 35 degrees, 30 minutes, 50 seconds, that will put the bottom of my property and the bottom of the house square to the screen. So I have to do that quick math. 360, and I punch in 45, 30, 50, minus that, and the bearing then is 314, 29, 10. Back in soft plan, that would be my actual direction of north. Hit OK. This point's going to ask me to rotate the items on the drawing. This time I do want to say yes. Drawing rotates that angle, and now as you can see, the building in front of the property are 90 degrees to my drawing screen. Next, I'm going to come to draw, sightline, and setback. I'm going to draw a setback line parallel to the front of the building or front of the property, and I want another setback line parallel to my left property line. The left property line obviously is not 90 degrees to the screen, so I'm going to come up here to options and cursor options, and a little tool here called pick cursor axis. This allows me to pick any object, in this case that side property line, and the cursor's axis will be parallel to that object I picked. I can come back up here to draw, sightline, setback, and draw a line that is dead parallel to that side property. I'll then add a dimension line through them. Because they're parallel, the dimension line will be struck between them. I want to put my cursor back to the 90-degree cursor lock. Two ways to do so: under options, and then cursor options again. The angle cursor was dictated by the first tool I used, pick cursor axis. That's where it came up with the 86.89 degrees. I can turn on and off the angle cursor by turning that off here, and it puts me back to the default cursor axis. Turning it back on does that. With the keyboard, if I hold the shift key down and tap the tilde, which is that little squiggly to the left of the number 1 on your keyboard, that alternates between the angled cursor and the default cursor. And I'll get a dimension line for the front. Now that I have those dimensions put in, I'll edit those values and specify the exact setbacks. Side is 18, the front is 56 feet up. I'll then again come to tools and fillet those setback lines. And where those two setback lines intersect, that's the corner of the or where the building needs to go. So to move it, I'm going to come up here to my move command, or more specifically block move. And before I select the object to move, I'm going to turn from the status bar the select move point. I'm going to turn that on because this will allow me to select the objects, in this case, the two building outlines, and again, the important of the reference circle. Again, the reference circle is what the program uses to align the drawings up when we assemble them for 3D. We'll eventually add our site plan to the model assembly so we can see it in 3D, and the program will use that reference circle to make sure everything aligns. The reference circle was saved there because the reference circle was already in the main floor plan at that same corner. So when you do generate a building outline, it creates a building outline of the perimeter walls, but if there's also a reference point already established, the saved site plan drawing automatically places the same reference point symbol at that same corner. So I've selected what I wanted to move, again, those three objects. I got my cursor snap on, which is what I needed to do as well. I'll pick that corner, turn off my cursor lock, and snap it to the intersection of my setbacks. So now my house is more accurately placed. If I want to locate corners of, or I guess other corners of the building's perimeter, from the dimension menu, there is a dimension point command. This allows me to indicate perpendicular from the site to that corner of the building what that distance is. So if I needed to locate a different point, I can use the dimension point command to do so. So I now have created a more accurate site plan. I guess we could kind of compare it to the image one that I imported. So this one was done relatively quickly, and it's a fairly accurate representation of what the site is. I'm a little bit off here, perhaps on the side yard, but you can tell that the image one was a much more quick method, a little more down and dirty, but it gets the job done, especially if you don't have that surveyor's coordinates information. I'm going to close the image one, and we'll develop the more accurate site plan. From the navigation, locate the actual site plan we have, and I'm going to add it to the model. The site plan ideally should be the first drawing assembled, so I'm going to hit move to bottom. And if I come to my 3D point of view, we now have our site plan situated under my building. Next thing is we want to tell the program that the building, at least from the back of the structure, is 2 feet down. So I'm going to come back to my site plan. From the end of the draw menu is a site options command, which brings up our site options. Allow me to specify the building's position. In this case, I said 2 feet down. Hit OK. Back in 3D, the building is moved 2 feet down into the site, which is accurate for the back of the structure, but towards the front, we need to do something a little different. Before we do that, we'll take note as well that the building outline acts as a hole in the ground to accept the house. So we have a building outline for obviously the main structure. The walkout stair here wasn't part of the original building outline that was created. A reason for that is because I decided to use the main floor plan as the starting point for my building outline. If I open up the foundation or basement plan of the structure, there is some retaining walls drawn here for that stair walkout. But again, those retaining walls don't form a perimeter. There's an open end here where the stairs are, so it would never have created a building outline either way. That's okay. I can come back to my site plan and manually create a building outline for something that the program didn't add on its own. To do so, I'm first going to go to File and Overlay my basement. That contains the information I'm looking for. So I'm going to add a new building outline there, draw building outline and building outline again. I'll use the line method, make sure my cursor snap is on, it is, and I'll snap to the corners of the overlaid drawing, creates a new building outline. So back in 3D, we now can see the bottom of that walkout stair. The deck also created a building outline, though it didn't need to cut a hole. So back in my site plan, the reason why there's a hole there is because one of the properties of the building outline, if I edit it, is that it's going to cut the ground. I'll turn that off for the building outline representing the deck, and sure enough, it no longer cuts a hole in the ground. Next thing we're going to do is start sloping the site. We do so by indicating elevations to start off with at corners of the actual building outline. To do so, I'm going to go to my edit command. I'm going to edit first the bottom corner. Because there's two site objects here, there's a building outline and the property. What I'm doing here is indicating the elevation or shot point at that location, and it wants to know what object this shot point will belong to. Ideally, it's going to belong to the property, so I'll select it. And it's a 4'10" up from the 0 point. I'll edit the opposite side, same idea. This shot point belongs to the property. 4'10", it's already remembered. I'll hit OK, come back to 3D, and it does that, but it has no other information, so it assumes all points of the property are now 4 feet 10 inches up. We'll come back to the site plan, and now we'll edit the 2 points at the back. Again, make sure they belong to the property, and I'll set those to 0. Do the same for the opposite corner, property, reestablish it at 0. Hit OK. In 3D, we now start to see the slope. I'm going to continue editing corners, or strategic corners, if you will, of my building outline. I'm going to edit this corner. Again, always refer it to the property. That's going to be 4'4", a little bit lower than the front. I want that same elevation to be here. 4'4". And I could do the inside corners, property, 4'4". Looks like it knows what it is. And that's already 4'4". You'll see that the program is doing its best guess to predict what certain elevations are when you select them. So once I have established between the two endpoints it's 4'4", it assumes between those two it's the same. It has no other information to think otherwise. Now that I've got the corners of the building outline where they need to go, and I can come back to 3D, see how that looks. I got a slight slope from here and a much steeper slope towards the end. The next thing I want to do is start editing the corners of my property. And I'm going to establish what the elevation is of those. That's 3'6". Notice it's not asking me what this belongs to. There's only the property at that corner. So it'll just simply prompt me for the elevation. It's 3'6" towards the front. And towards the back, I'm going to put those at 2 feet down. And back in 3D, that's the result of adding those shot information. So to quickly slope your site, once you have your building outline and your property established, you start editing corners of your building outline and the site so you can establish what the elevation is at those corners. Next thing we're going to do, because we add towards the existing structure here, the actual slope is a little different between where the building or the original building is and where the end of the new building. So we're going to add some sight lines or grade lines to control slopes between corners of the building. Draw, grade. I'll again use the line method. And I'm going to draw 4 grade lines between my 4'4" and my 0. There'll be 1 foot increments. So I'll have 4 grade lines at 4 feet, 3 feet, 2, and 1. The trick to adding grade lines as well with cursor snap on, the first thing is optional, but I like to start my grade line just beyond the outside edge of the property, but the next click should snap to the edge of your property. The number of clicks you then do next is also important. You can add as many as you want, keeping in mind that the more clicks you add, the more or the greater change in property is going to occur. In other words, I like to keep it simple. If there's not much change between this point and next point, I don't need to add 50 shot points between the two clicks I just did. The more shot points or the more clicks you add indicates the more shot points the program has to deal with and calculate for. So we're going to keep those to a minimum. So just like I said, when we snapped the first, or I guess the second point on the edge of the property, when we get to the building outline, it's also important to snap to its edge. Now, what you're seeing there is what we call a projection snap. And though it does have its uses, right now it's kind of fighting with me. So this is why I'm kind of zooming in to get rid of that projection snap. I don't want to be straight across. So I'm going to come in a little bit, snap it down. And again, when I come to the opposite side, snap directly on the edge of the property. I can end there, but I like to just end it just beyond. And when you're done, it's indicated by a right mouse click. So it's a left, left, left for each point you're clicking in, and then a right mouse click will pop up the dialog asking you for the elevation of that sight line. In this case, that one's going to be 4 feet up. What I want to do next, though, is get rid of the projection snap. Although it has its uses right now, I don't want it to be shown. Options, cursor options, cursor options. Again, we can turn off the projection snap. And we'll only get snap points now when we're on top of the object. I'll continue drawing more grade lines, always snapping towards the edge, snapping on the building outline. Now I got 2 here. I got one for the house, one for the deck. Come to the end, and that one's going to be 3 feet. That one's at 2, and I got one more to go. And that one's at 1 foot. Back in my 3D, you can start to see how these grade lines are now also calculating for the terrain. At this point, I'm going to do a split screen. I'm going to right-click on my 3D view and add it as a vertical tab group so I can see the 3D on one side. Get a little closer. And my 2D site plan on the opposite. If I want to tighten up that grade lines, I can go ahead and use my move command and start moving these sight lines. And as I move them, we can start changing how the grading is going to occur. Now, the trick with moving your grade lines is that you don't want to cross over a neighboring sight line or grade line. If you start crossing a 2 foot over top of the 3 foot, doesn't make much sense. You'll start to get odd shot and elevation points within your actual site plan. So try to avoid, when you're moving your grade lines, try to avoid overlapping them. But we can move them to get a much steeper site towards the front. As you can see here, I don't have much room. There we go. And as I move them, I start to get a much steeper site along the edge. Once you have them in place, you can also edit those and from the site polygon, draw them as a spline. This just smooths them out. So if you're going to print these, representing them as a spline, they just look a little bit smoother. Next thing I want to do is along the back here is going to be if I switch this around, on the opposite side of the structure, I want to have a retaining wall. So back in my plan view, I switch this back to drawing mode and define really quickly here a retaining wall. We'll make it out of stone natural, and we'll make it 12 inches wide. And the height, in this case, I only need to be 4'4", 52 inches, so we'll set that as the default height. And I made an honest mistake here. I should have done this in the actual site plan, my mistake. So switch the site plan back to drawing mode. I'll repeat that process real quick here. "12 inches. So I want to define that wall in the site plan. That's where I'm going to draw it. I switched my site plan back to drawing mode. Oh, the information, the actual site information is not shown. So options, visible items, site category. I'm going to turn on the visibility of all the site information while I'm in drawing mode. Draw wall. There's my retaining wall, and I'll go ahead and draw it. And we can see it there now in 3D. Because I want that retaining wall to obviously hold back the earth, I'm going to refine how the grade lines are shown. So back in site mode, where I can then modify the grade lines, I showed you that we can move the grade lines, but we can also adjust the vertices or the points of the grade lines. So I'm going to use my adjust item command. And I'm going to adjust these grade lines in this case, the grade lines on that 4 foot are going to be towards the bottom of the wall, and the grade lines for 3 feet will end in the middle of the wall. Zoom in here to get the right one. And I'm going to move the grade line for the 1 foot to be on the top edge of the wall. I'm then going to turn off the spline look because once they're near the wall, they need to be more straight. So now we're getting a retained wall look. I can zoom back, and that's the result of doing so. So the trick here is to add those grade lines within the thickness of the retaining wall, putting the high end on one side, the low end on the opposite. Between the retaining wall and where the deck starts, I'm going to add a rock symbol. There's a rock, landscape rock, and there's a number of landscape rocks. These are part of the Soft Plan Plus library. So if you don't have plus, unfortunately, you won't have these available, but those who do, there's a number of fairly highly detailed landscape rocks. And I'm going to borrow these to make a rock step. I'm going to add one. And another, until I see them there in 3D view. And then from the 3D, I'll kind of use my binoculars to zoom up to them. So there's my rocks. I'm going to fine tune where they're located. I'm just going to use within the 3D mode, I'm going to use my move command. I'm going to move this guy up a bit and this guy up to sit on top of him. And then I'm going to use the adjust command in 3D and make them a little bit longer. Maybe come this way a bit. Looks like I need one more, so I'm going to use my copy command. I'll copy it over and move that guy up. So I'm creating a step, if you will, out of those landscape rocks to give me that effect. Back in my plan view, between the retaining wall and the existing structure, we'll add some site work and a patio. I'll use the line method and just with the cursor snap on, snap between the retaining wall, corner of the house, and back where I started. From the 3D point of view, the patio has been drawn, but it doesn't know where to position itself, so it goes to the 0 elevation. Looks like it's fallen down. I'll use my edit command, and again, I'll edit it from a 3D point of view because I know from the back of the house it's a 4'4" offset, so I'll raise it up 4'4". I'll then adjust the final rock to meet back towards the patio. Towards the side, there'll be a sidewalk and a driveway. So we'll quickly add those. So back in my plan view, sidewalk will be on the side of the building and a driveway towards the front. Back to draw site work, sidewalk. When we draw a sidewalk and the road, there'll be a third method of drawing these, in this case that of an object, which allows us to specify a consistent width. We don't have to trace the perimeter. In this case, the walk on the side is about 4'4". I'll align the edge, which means if I hit OK, I can trace along the edge. I'll snap here, snap to there. At this point, it's asking me for a direction. I want the sidewalk to be on the property, so I'll poise my cursor towards the left and click again. I can draw additional edges of my sidewalk if I need to turn the corner, but I don't need to here. I'll just right click and it draws the sidewalk. We can see from a 3D again, like the patio before it, it falls to the 0 level. I'll edit it in the 3D view, and this time I'm going to hit Fit Site Object to Ground. What this does, it raises the sidewalk to be at the level or the current level of where the ground is. I'll do the same for the drive. I'll come back to the plan view, Site Work, Drive. I'll use it as an object. This case is a 28-foot wide drive, and I'll again trace the right edge towards the property, face it on the property, and then a right mouse click to draw it. Edit the drive and fit it to the ground. Couple of things we may now need to overcome, and that is the elevation of the grade where these two meet. I'll edit this corner choose the property as the shot point to modify, and I want that to be 4 feet 10 inches. I'll edit this back corner of the property, and it needs to be 4 feet 3 inches. Now that I've indicated where the grade is, I'll reset these to fit to the ground again. And as you can see, the driveway is next. They both now know where the grade is and they fit more appropriately. Next thing I want to get accomplished here is I want to put some stone underneath the patio as opposed to the grass. Back in plan view, I'm going to come to draw a miscellaneous site plan. I can use these for whatever purpose I want. Here I want to indicate some gravel or stone. So I'll use miscellaneous A for it, and I'll use the line method and snap the same corners. Now in this case, wherever the grade lines are cutting through, I'm going to snap to those points as well. And the reason I've done that is because I want to fit that miscellaneous polygon to the curves generated by those grade lines. First, I'm going to edit miscellaneous A. By default, it doesn't know what it is representing, so it doesn't cut anything. So I'm going to specify that it cuts the ground. We now see it cutting the ground. But from a 3D point of view, miscellaneous A is not yet visible. To make it visible, I'm going to come to Options, Material, Site, and make miscellaneous A visible or display it. Now I can see it. From here, I'll also edit it. Again, I'll stick to 3D edit and fit it to the ground. And it's fitting to the ground based off of the shot points or edges I've selected. Otherwise, it would have been a continuous slope from front to back, and I want it to kind of conform to the shape of the ground. We see parts of the ground through it. That can easily be overcome by just making the miscellaneous A a little bit deeper. So I'll set it to 12 inches. It should be deep enough. And we've eliminated the ground kind of protruding through it by just making it a little bit deeper. Hit OK. The next task perhaps is to add certain textures to the model. I'll use a surface edit. I'll first click on my patio. I'll go to exterior finish, stone and flagstone. There's a number of fairly decent flagstone options here, kind of like this one, so I'll apply that to my patio. I'll then do a surface edit to my miscellaneous. And under the site category, go to stone, and there's some stone options I can apply here too. Let's use that one, kind of a river rock look. If you want to adjust the scale or size of it, you can do so by increasing or decreasing the size. Make sure maintain aspect ratio is on, but I could maybe make that a little bit smaller, 2 feet or larger, whatever is necessary. The trick here as well is to enable smoothing on that. You'll see that without smoothing on the surface edit, we'll start to see the angularity of the terrain, or in this case, the rocks. Enabling the smoothing will eliminate that angular and kind of smooth out the look of that surface. A couple more things to add here, and just a couple of trees and some landscaping. So back in my plan view, draw symbol, there's a couple of tree symbols that we're going to add. First one is a billboard tree. I'll choose this green maple and I'll add one towards the back. A billboard tree, as the name implies, basically is a single surface, and a picture of a tree is kind of pasted onto that surface. The next tree we'll add is a high surface count tree. There's another maple here as well. As the name implies, these are highly detailed trees. I'll plop one in here. And if I return back to the 3D mode, we can see kind of the difference between the two. One is a true three-dimensional tree, which we have there, and the other one is a billboard, which again is just a single surface that always faces the camera, but has the picture of a tree on it. The high surface count tree, you want to be careful in your use of those because they do greatly increase the number of surfaces the program has to maintain and look after. So you're making a much more complicated 3D model by placing on a high surface count tree, whereas the billboard tree basically is negligible. It doesn't add much because it's only a single surface. What I often do is I add, if I come back to my plan view, I add a bunch of billboard trees as background information. So well, that one's probably not tall enough. There's an evergreen oak that's fairly big. I'll edit those and make them yet bigger yet. Let's make this guy, and again, I hit maintain aspect ratio so I can make it, let's say 40 feet tall. Maybe this green maple will also be fairly tall, but it will remain fairly narrow. Back in 3D, I can now have some background information or background trees, and in the foreground, I'll keep my high surface count tree. I'm going to move that back slightly. The final thing I want to cover off today is, again, adding a little bit more landscape around the edges of the deck. Back in my plan view, draw a symbol, landscape. There's some assembled planting beds. I'm going to use the 2x8 rectangle. The assembled planting bed is a combination of many symbols created as one. It consists of a flat rectangle planting bed and several billboard, in this case, billboard plants and bushes or shrubs. I'll add 2 to this side, and I'll add 2 to that side. So from a 3D point of view, you can start to see that it is adding a lot more information. Again, these are billboard plants and shrubs. And they work great if you're wanting it to go on a flat plane or a flat ground. But across the side, these need to kind of follow the slope of the terrain. And that doesn't actually quite work with that assembled planting bed. So what I'm going to do back in my 2D point of view, I'm going to right click on the rectangle planting bed and explode it. This turns it into, and I'll do the same for this guy down here, this turns that one symbol into the X number of symbols that make it up. So now I have individual billboard, in this case a billboard shrub, the phlox, and plant 21, and underneath it all is a flat rectangular planting bed symbol. This is the symbol that doesn't know how to conform to the shape of the ground. So I'm going to erase it. And in its place, draw site work and draw the planting bed site object. And again, I'm going to snap where I need the change of grade to occur in. and end where I started. That adds it as we had seen with the sidewalk and patio before it, so I'll simply edit that and fit it to the ground. The symbols that are now referencing that planting bed that I've added, they don't know any better to follow it until we tell it to clean up. So if I edit those symbols, those billboard symbols, the trees and the shrubs, the cleanup has been turned off. So I'll turn it back on, hit OK, quickly do a repeat edit box to get the rest of them from that explode option, and then do a quick cleanup. And that will then have those plants and shrubs follow the contour of the planting bed I've added. I'll position my 3D back to the original, kind of set myself back up here to get a good 3D shot. I'm going to make my high surface count tree much taller. Let's make it 35 feet. And if I wanted to finish off, I can do a final ray trace of the completed scene. So I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Fundamental. So regardless of your experience with SoftPlan, whether you're new to the program or have been using it for many years, I do hope you've learned some useful tricks and tips today. As mentioned, this seminar will be posted on our social media pages, so you can review it over the next little while. And I thank you very much for joining me today, and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you.